Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're taking a look at a sermon transcript called "Is There Not a Cause?" It really digs into some of those big questions about our purpose in life and how that ties in with faith. So get ready, because this is one that will really get you thinking.
You're telling me this sermon really goes all in with some of the tougher questions. It starts right off the bat with the story of David and Goliath to set the stage.
Oh yeah, that's a classic. But what really stood out to me was that it wasn't just about the whole giant slaying aspect. It was about recognizing those causes that we're meant to champion, even when doubt creeps in or people try to hold us back.
It's really interesting how the sermon focuses on David's unwavering focus. His own brother is there telling him just go home. But David is completely fixed on his mission. He knows what he has to do. And that kind of focus, being able to, you know, tune out all the noise is so important, whether you're facing a literal giant or, even just tackling a difficult project at work.
It's like having that internal compass, right? Reminds me of working on creative projects, and you start to second guess yourself. All those doubts and fears just pop up. But if you could just get back to that core purpose, that why behind what you're doing, it helps you push through.
Exactly. And the sermon actually asks us directly, what causes are you passionate about? It's like a moment of truth where you have to look inward and really think about what drives you.
And it keeps going. It challenges us to move beyond our comfort zones.
Yeah.
It's about looking beyond just our personal wants and needs.
Right. And it uses the Israelites at Horeb as an example of what not to do. They got comfortable, maybe a little too comfortable. And the sermon warns us against falling into that same trap of spiritual stagnation. It's like what happens when you stop growing, when you stop pushing yourself. Do you just become complacent?
It's that comfort zone problem,
Oh,
isn't it?
no.
It's cozy, but it's also where things get stale. This sermon is like a reminder that real growth often comes when you push your boundaries, step outside the familiar. It's scary,
Yeah.
but it's also where the really exciting stuff happens.
And then the sermon goes in a direction that I found super insightful. It dives into this idea that we're all gifts. Every single one of us is a unique individual with a specific purpose, and that purpose is meant to solve problems, not just huge problems, but everyday problems too. Problems in our families, our communities, even at our jobs.
It's like we're all pieces of a giant puzzle, and until we find our place, the picture isn't complete, right?
Hmm.
But the question is, how do you even begin to figure out what that purpose is? I mean, some people just seem to know, but for a lot of us, it's a total mystery.
Well, that's where the sermon gets really practical. It talks about this transforming power that comes with embracing your cause. It argues that when you really lean into that purpose, when you actively pursue it, it changes you. You grow, you evolve, you become more of who you were meant to be. It's not just about doing good things in the world, it's about becoming a better version of yourself.
That's such a powerful thought. It's like our purpose isn't just some external to-do list. It's part of who we are at our core. And when we pursue it, when we wrestle with it, it helps us unlock our true potential.
The sermon actually uses some parts of the Bible to back this idea up. Verses like 2 Corinthians 3.18 and Romans 12.2 talk about spiritual transformation, becoming more like Christ. But even if you put aside the religious part of it, the basic message still makes sense. Aligning yourself with a bigger purpose can totally transform you from the inside out.
Okay, I'm already feeling inspired, but I'm wondering how this plays out in real life. I mean, the sermon talks about all these amazing people from the Bible, Noah, Jeremiah, John the Baptist, all driven by a cause, a mission that impacted the world. But those are some pretty epic examples. How do we translate that to modern times? Most of us aren't building arks or preaching in the wilderness.
That's where the sermon really gets into the practical side of things. It encourages us to seek God's guidance through prayer, and to trust in his plan for us, to be open to the ways he might be calling us to action.
So it's not just passively waiting for some kind of sign. It's about actively seeking direction, having those conversations with a higher power, however you define that, and being open to where that path leads you.
Exactly. And that means looking at yourself honestly. The sermon talks about recognizing our weaknesses and not being afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
It even uses that example of Peter, when he starts to sink while walking on water and he cries out to Jesus. We all have those moments, right? Where it feels like sink or swim.
Oh, absolutely. Those times when you're in over your head and it feels like you're about to go under, that image of Peter reaching out for help, it's a good reminder that we don't have to do this alone.
Hmm.
It's okay to ask for support, to lean on others, especially when you're working towards something bigger than yourself.
For sure. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with community. Having those people around you who support your faith, who push you to grow, who help you stay accountable, It's so important.
It's like having a spiritual safety net, or maybe even your own personal cheer squad. People who get you, who cheer you on, who want you to be your best.
Mm.
But the sermon also had some strong words about certain types of messages, specifically those that focus on misapplied grace. It even calls out Jude 1.4.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. The sermon uses that verse, which talks about people who twist the idea of grace to excuse bad behavior. It's a reminder that while grace is a powerful force for good, it shouldn't make us complacent or entitled. Real grace, the kind that creates positive change, helps us live a life that reflects our values and makes a difference in the world. It's not a free pass to just do whatever you want.
So it's about understanding that grace should lift us up, not let us off the hook. We're called to do more than just sit back and enjoy it. We're called to act, to actually make things better.
Exactly. And the sermon connects this to purpose. It suggests that surrounding ourselves with things that strengthen our faith can help us stay focused. It encourages us to look for things, communities, mentors, things that remind us of our values and help us grow.
Which makes me think about all the ways we can connect with our faith or values these days. Books, podcasts like this one, music, even online groups. It's about being intentional with what we let into our lives, who we spend our time with, and what messages we allow to shape our thinking.
Absolutely. And it goes back to that idea of having a good support system, both online and offline. People who can help you navigate this whole journey of faith and purpose in the modern world. It's like having a group of guides and friends to share the experience with. But at its core, this sermon is about that idea that we each have a cause, a unique purpose that we're supposed to fulfill.
And it's our job to find it, embrace it, and let it shape who we become. Now, the sermon does a good job of showing us these big examples from the Bible, but it also talks about finding purpose in everyday life. It's not always about these huge actions or accomplishments.
Right, and it actually gives some advice on how to find that everyday purpose. The sermon tells us to look at our families, our communities, our workplaces. It says we should ask ourselves, what problems can I solve? And what talents do I have that I can use to make things better? Yeah.
So it's not about waiting for some big life-changing mission to just fall into your lap. It's about being present, being aware, and being willing to step up when you see an opportunity, no matter how small it might seem. It's understanding that even the little things can have a ripple effect and create real change.
Exactly. It goes back to that idea that we all have unique gifts and talents that we're supposed to share with the world. The sermon uses the example of Jesus, how he was a carpenter. It shows that even ordinary work can be a way of expressing your purpose. It's about being intentional and finding meaning in everything you do, even the everyday stuff.
I find that so encouraging. It means that no matter what your job is, no matter what your day-to-day looks like, you can still find purpose in it if you have the right attitude.
Definitely. But the sermon is also real about the fact that finding your purpose can be tough, especially with so much going on in the world. There's so much pressure to do certain things, to be a certain way, and it's easy to lose sight of that inner compass.
It's true. It's like we're being pulled in a million directions, and it can be so hard to hear that little voice inside that tells you what really matters. So how do you block out all that noise and get back to that sense of purpose?
That's where prayer and seeking guidance come in. The sermon encourages us to regularly ask ourselves, what is my purpose? And how can I serve others right now? It's about making time for reflection, for looking inward, for those quiet times where you can connect with something bigger than yourself and listen for that inner voice.
It's about remembering that you're not on this journey by yourself. You have support, both from within and from the people around you, to help you along the way.
That's a great point. And it reminds us that figuring out our purpose isn't something we have to do completely alone. We can rely on our faith, our communities, even the wisdom of people who have been down this road before us.
That's an awesome thought, and it brings us back to the main question of this sermon. Is there not a cause?
And the sermon's answer is a big yes. There's a cause for each of us, and it's just waiting to be discovered.
Okay, I'm feeling fired up now, ready to go out and make a difference. But before we get too carried away, I think we need to take a minute to let all this sink in. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Is There Not a Cause? And talk about some of the key takeaways for everyone listening. All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into Is There Not a Cause? I don't know about you, but my brain is still buzzing with all this stuff about purpose and faith.
Yeah, for sure. This sermon really makes you think about those big questions, like why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing with our lives? It's a lot to unpack.
It really is.
Yeah.
So let's break it down for our listeners. If someone was just tuning in, What would you say is the one big takeaway from this sermon?
I think the most important message is that everyone has a purpose. It's
Yeah.
not just for certain people or, like you have to have a certain job or have it all figured out. Everyone is unique with their own talents and gifts, and those are meant to be used to make the world a better place, even in small ways.
So it's like we all have this potential, this purpose, just waiting to be discovered. But it's not something that just happens automatically, right?
Right. And that's where the idea of actively searching for and pursuing your purpose comes in. You don't just get a map at birth or anything. The sermon encourages us to ask for guidance, be open to new things, and actually take steps to develop our talents. You have to kind of take charge of your own journey, even when it feels confusing or uncertain.
So it's a two-part thing. Knowing that you have a purpose and then doing something about it, figuring out what it is and how to actually live it out.
Exactly. And the sermon gives us some tools to do that. Practical advice on prayer, finding a good support system, even being careful about what kind of messages we let influence us. It's like building a toolkit for finding your purpose.
And speaking of those messages, I wanted to touch on that part about misapplied grace. It's a reminder that our faith, what we believe in, should push us to act, not just to be comfortable, right?
Oh, definitely. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk, living out your values. And the sermon links that back to purpose by saying how important it is to surround ourselves with people and things that help us grow and become better versions of ourselves. Find those people and communities that help you stay true to yourself.
So it's more than just feeling good or having those warm, fuzzy feelings. It's about taking those feelings and turning them into action,
Yeah.
actually making a difference in the world.
That's it. Making sure your actions match up with what you believe in doing the right thing and using your gifts to help others in whatever way you can.
I like how this sermon takes these big stories from the Bible, like about Noah, Jeremiah, John the Baptist, and makes them relatable to our lives today.
Exactly. They're not just old stories, they have lessons that still apply to us now. Like, think about Noah. He had this mission to build an ark when everyone thought he was crazy. It took so much courage and belief to keep going.
So it's about having that same kind of bravery,
Mm,
you know, being willing to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's hard or people don't agree with you.
absolutely. It might look different for each person. Maybe it's speaking up for what's right. Maybe it's supporting a friend. Maybe it's just chasing after a dream that other people don't get. It's about trusting your gut and having the guts to do something about it.
What about Jeremiah? He was known for being really empathetic,
Yeah.
really feeling the pain of others. How can we bring that kind of compassion into our own lives?
Well, Jeremiah was so in tune with the suffering of his people. He didn't avoid it. He cried with them, shared their burdens. For us today, that could mean really being there for people who are going through tough times, offering support, or speaking up for those who are being treated unfairly. It's about letting your empathy lead to action, actually doing something to help.
I love how this sermon takes these big Bible stories and connects them to our own personal journeys. It makes them feel more real and helpful. It's like they're offering us guidance for our own lives.
And it shows that our purpose, our cause, isn't separate from our everyday lives. It's woven into everything you know. The choices we make, the things we do, how we treat people around us.
We've talked about a lot today, but before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone listening with one last thought. As you go about your day, your week, your life, ask yourself, what's my cause? What kind of impact you want to make on the world? What do you want people to remember you for? The answers might surprise you. And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.